Good afternoon, all of you. And you had to wait for some time. So we'll go ahead now. I'll begin talking on infrastructure to you. And once we have talked infrastructure, then we will talk services, which is a very small amount. That is the aspect. So we will talk infrastructure first, and then we talk services after that. So right now the idea will be to first talk infrastructure and then talk on services. So a very good afternoon to everyone joining me here. Nice to see you all too. Good afternoon everyone, and thank you for waiting for 4 or 5 minutes. We were just connecting, having certain issues in the connections, but now we are well and moving. So I think I can move on with you then. So I begin talking to you. We start off with infrastructure, and within infrastructure, the first talk is National Infrastructure Pipeline Project. That is one thing that Economic Survey does, a talk on National Infrastructure Pipeline Project that they bring across. Thank you, Shwetang. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. So when we talk about the National Infrastructure Pipeline Project, it was announced December 2019 by the Finance Minister. And the idea is to develop coordination and funding. This is to develop coordination and funding with respect to infrastructure development in India. So government says that if we want to achieve a $5 trillion economy, if we want to achieve a $5 trillion economy, then in that case, we will have to go for at least 111 lakh crore rupees worth of expenditure on infrastructure. That is what the survey also recalls. And survey says that if we want to achieve to be a $5 trillion economy, soon, that is, say by 2026-27, investment in infrastructure will be 111 lakh crore. So 111 lakh crore in investment in infrastructure is around $1.5 trillion. That is the investment that we are looking for in infrastructure. ये रुपीस 111 लाख करोड़ है, तो अगर 111 लाख करोड़ रुपए की बात करें तो ये 1.5 ट्रिलियन डॉलर्स होंगे जो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में खर्च होने की बात अब रहती है. That approximately 1.5 trillion dollars is what we are looking at as investment in infrastructure. So the idea is that let's push for this. Let's go for this $5 trillion economy, and let's go for a $1.5 trillion investment in infrastructure through the National Infrastructure Pipeline Project. And survey very clearly points out that there are particular sectors which are being targeted here. That is, in the National Infrastructure Pipeline, in the fiscal years 20 to 25, the major target will be energy. Again, this is from prelims point of view. Major targeted projects, 24% in energy sector. And the project started with 6,800 projects were targeted first, initially, and survey says now in above 9,000 projects in India. जब नेशनल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पाइपलाइन की शुरुआत हुई तो 6,800 प्रोजेक्ट्स कवर करने की बात हुई थी. अब 9,000 से ऊपर प्रोजेक्ट्स इनमें इंक्लूडेड हैं. When National Infrastructure pipeline project started, 6,800 projects were to be covered here. Now it is more than 9,000 projects. Out of that, 24% is in energy, followed by 19% in roads. Road transport is the other part where huge expenditure is needed. So approximately 19 lakh crore rupees, 20 lakh crore rupees planned in road expenditure. Urban infrastructure development is 16%. 16% for urban infrastructure development and 13% in railways. So again, from prelims point of view, this should be clear to you that these are the top 4 planned expenditure that are being done in infrastructure. Then of course, rural infrastructure is the other one after that, but the number goes down. The number goes to below 10%, around 6% in rural infrastructure, and similarly 6% in irrigation. So there are other expenditures also involved in the national infrastructure pipeline, but right now these are the major expenditure patterns. And the idea of national infrastructure pipeline is funding, that how funding will be generated. So it is said that to meet all these expenditures, to meet the infrastructure expenditures, there will be funding done by various sources. So funding and coordination of projects. These are the 2 major parts of concentration for the government. For funding, they are focusing on national infrastructure pipeline project, and for coordination, they are focusing on Gati Shakti. That they are saying that 16 departments over 9 ministries will be connected via the Gati Shakti portal. तो जब भी आपके मन में आए कि गति शक्ति और नेशनल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पाइपलाइन का फर्क क्या है, नेशनल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पाइपलाइन फाइनेंसिंग और फंडिंग से रिलेटेड है, गति शक्ति कोऑर्डिनेशन इंफॉर्मेशन से रिलेटेड है. सो डिफरेंट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट विल बी गिवन कोऑर्डिनेशन, गिवन implementation ease, non-duplication of project through गति शक्ति. तो गति शक्ति का काम है कि डुप्लीकेशन ना हो. गति शक्ति का काम है कि प्रोजेक्ट इंटरवेंशंस कम हो. गति शक्ति का काम है कि अगर एक जगह रोड की खुदाई करनी है तो पहले खुदाई हो जाए तभी नया रोड बने. और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पाइपलाइन का काम है कि फंडिंग कैसे जनरेट हो इन सब कामों के लिए, और ये फंडिंग किस किस मिनिस्ट्री को कैसे मिले, उनके बीच में कोऑर्डिनेशन लाने की. सो गति शक्ति इज विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू इंप्लीमेंटेशन ऑफ द प्रोजेक्ट, कोऑर्डिनेशन प्लान इन द प्रोजेक्ट, एंड नेशनल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पाइपलाइन इज विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू द फंडिंग ऑफ द प्रोजेक्ट. आई होप द टू थिंग्स आर क्लियरर टू ऑल ऑफ अस नाउ. Also remember, when we talk about national infrastructure pipeline, it is also decided that funding will be done via budgetary support. Already this year in the budget, the government has gone for more than 7 lakh crore rupees of budgetary support, plus public-private partnership. The economic survey says that India has the second highest number of public-private partnership among all developing countries, plus bonds and other financial assets which will be issued in the market by different public sector companies. They will issue bonds, they will issue financial assets for borrowings from the market, and plus national asset monetization pipeline. So the idea of national asset monetization pipeline is to lease out government assets. जो सरकार के assets हैं उन्हें लीज आउट करना, बेचना नहीं, लीज आउट करना. नॉट टू सेल दोज असेट्स बट टू लीज देम आउट सो दैट गवर्नमेंट कंट्रोल्स द ओनरशिप राइट्स ऑन दोज असेट्स. गवर्नमेंट डजंट डाइल्यूट द ओनरशिप राइट्स ऑन दोज असेट्स, एंड येट इट इज एबल, गवर्नमेंट डजंट डाइल्यूट द ओनरशिप राइट ऑन द असेट्स, and yet the government is able to generate funds from those assets. So government will be leasing out railway platforms, extra land, and for that land the National Land Monetization Company has been created. So if you see, there are steps taken by the government regarding that. Coming back to this, so government will monetize land, government will monetize railway platforms, roadways for toll charges. Government will monetize airports. Government will monetize the public godowns, that is storehouses. Government will monetize stadiums, oil and gas pipelines, ports. So all these things will be leased out to the private sector. The idea that the government is pushing is, सरकार ये कहती है इससे ownership सरकार की रहेगी लेकिन फिर भी revenue आता रहेगा, and there will be better utilization of the assets which are at the moment underutilized when they are under government control. So that is the idea of a national asset monetization pipeline. Also, it says that it will also result in better maintenance and repair work of the assets, and that will result in keeping the assets continuously productive and higher efficiency. So, and then it is thought that this national asset monetization pipeline will generate around 6 lakh crore rupees worth of assets for the government in the next 5 years. So these are the various ways in which the government is targeting the basic idea on budgetary support, etc. So this is for the national infrastructure pipeline project. Then remember, so economic survey doesn't give us a lot of detail, but I tried giving you some analysis of it so that you can have a basic idea on it. Yes, more efficient utilization of assets, Shwetank, because at the moment with government using those assets, many of the land are lying idle, a lot of infrastructure is not being used, lot of road is not being repaired, so that is more efficient utilization. Take the example of Udan. Before Udan scheme was launched, out of total 140 airports of India, only 45 were operational fully and only 30 were operational below utilization capacity. Today more than 120 airports are operational and more than 85 are achieving full utilization. So when you open up the structure, you allow better utilization, more efficient utilization, because the private sector has the onus to earn profit. Unfortunately, the culture we have in India, government doesn't think, or government bodies don't think that the resources can sustain only when profit is earned. So that is the basic idea that comes behind it. Now, coming to this, the next thing is, when we talk about, the economic survey gives a talk on road transport. There is nothing much in it. You just have to remember two things from here. One is 63 lakh kilometers is total road network of India, and 1.54 lakh kilometers is national highway out of it, and the government plans or targets national highway construction at 25,000 kilometers in 2022-23. But on road sector, we don't see much in economic survey, and in any case, I think I think there is not much that we can see over there. Yes, one thing more they tell us that when it comes to construction of national highways, in 2014-15, it was 4,000 kilometers per annum, which has now come to more than 12,000 kilometers per annum. So construction of national highway between 2014 and 2021 from 4,000 kilometers per annum to more than 12,000 kilometers per annum. So that is what it has reached in the last 7 years, is what they compare. So they say that the per day making average, which was less than 7 days per day, kilometers per day, is now touching almost 40 kilometers per day. So 7 kilometers per day kind of rate, now going up to almost 40 kilometers per day. Almost, it's a little less than 40 kilometers. It's almost 38 kilometers per day, and this is almost touching 13,000 kilometers per annum. So this is for national highway that they give a data. This just might be some useful, this might give you some use in your prelims examination. But other than that, in economic survey, the road transport has no major use. The railways topic has one use. On page 294, they give a box describing national rail plan. and that is what is important, which you should keep in mind. Page 294, they give us a talk on National Rail Plan. So I think in railways, the economic survey gives you this good input that you should keep in mind. So this National Rail Plan that they bring across, they say that in this National Rail Plan, there are certain target. So target is to increase, one, if I can call it, increase electrification of rail route from 63% in 2020-21 to 100% by 23-24, which will mean cleaner source of fuel, less use of diesel and so on, and helping railway reach the net zero capacity. Helping railway reach the net zero capacity. So this is one thing that brings across. The second thing that they are targeting is that capacity expansion of railway network. Capacity expansion of railway network by 2030. Capacity expansion of railway network by 2030 to reach levels of 2000 and levels needed in 2050. This is called preemptive capacity utilization. एक सही बात कही है रेलवे ने कि रेलवे की कैपेसिटी धीरे धीरे नहीं बढ़ सकती, बल्क में बढ़ाना पड़ेगा। तो जब बल्क इन्वेस्टमेंट करना ही है तो इतना करें. Since the bulk investment has to be done, so we should do as much investment that we make sure that once the investment is done, we don't need to invest for another 20 years in the same amount. So by 2030, the government is targeting that we should make sure that railway capacity should reach that much that is sufficient to reach till 2050. So that is another part which is very important, that invest so much that you are preempting. इतना इन्वेस्ट करो कि जो फ्यूचर की भी जरूरत है वो अभी कंप्लीट हो जाए. दैट इज द एस्पेक्ट दैट वी आर developing right now. Now remember, in the same thing they say that the other target is that railway share in goods transport should be increased from 26-27% to 40-45% by 2050. That railway share in goods transport should be increased in the same time period. So railway share in bulk commodity transport to be increased from 26 to 27% in 2020-21 to 40 to 45% by 2030. That allow more and more commodity transporters to use railways. It is cheaper. It will help a lot in reducing logistical costs in India. It will decongest Indian roads, which will be good for road transportation and safety purposes. And it will result in making sure that railways become more profitable in future by focusing on commodity transportation rather than only passenger transportation, where not much money can be charged. And then it says that the fourth point, the focus will be on capital expenditure. Focus on capital expenditure, capex as it is called, such that capital expenditure has increased from an average of 45,000 crore rupees per annum between 2009 to 2014. 2009 से 2014 के बीच में जो कैपिटल एक्सपेंडिचर था रेलवे में वो 45,000 करोड़ पर एनम के रेट पे था, टू 2,15,000 करोड़ पर एनम rupees between 2014 to 2021. So huge capital expenditure increase is observed in railways, good for safety, good for modernization, good for developing better amenities for passengers, good for developing better quality railway bogies, good for investment in protection with respect to manned electronic signaling. All this has been observed to be done in Indian Railways in the last few years. So this is what the Box 5 National Railway Plan tells us, which you should keep in mind. Then remember, the other thing that they talk about on civil aviation, there is nothing much that is given there. The privatization of Air India we already discussed when I was teaching you the initial chapter, so you can easily skip the talk on civil aviation. In ports, there are 2-3 things that you can focus upon in ports. That is, one is the port capacity increase in India. तो अगली चीज जो आती है वो है पोर्ट डेवलपमेंट. आप सिविल एविएशन डेवलपमेंट स्किप कर सकते हो इकोनॉमिक सर्वे से, वहां से बहुत ज्यादा कुछ हमें मिलेगा नहीं. सो यू कैन समथिंग दैट यू कैन स्किप अक्रॉस. नाउ कमिंग बैक टू दिस, सो व्हेन इट कम्स टू पोर्ट डेवलपमेंट, इट सेज दैट पोर्ट कैपेसिटी इन इंडिया हैज बीन इंक्रीज्ड. That is one thing that is interesting. Capacity of cargo handling on ports has increased from 800 million metric tons in 2011 to 1500 million metric tons by 2021-22. I have rounded it up. It is actually 1463 MMT. So I made it 1500 कि तुम्हें कैजुअल एक याद रहे कि अच्छा इतना बढ़ा है पोर्ट कैपेसिटी. So this is one thing that has happened. Also, apart from port capacity, the inland waterway navigation has improved, but I'll talk to you about it in just a little while. So one thing that the government has introduced, another they have said, that introduction of Sagar Mala, which has already completed projects worth rupees 94,000 crore. Already completed projects worth rupees 94,000 crore and targets more than rupees 7 lakh crore worth of projects. So this is, I'm sure you know about Sagar Mala already, so we'll not go into studying that. But with the objective of port capacity expansion, developing new major ports in India, already remember in that context, in your current affairs class also I taught you this, but those of you who could not attend it, Vadhavan port in Maharashtra has now been given clearance by the cabinet to be this is not an economic survey, but I thought that I can tell you this, to be the 13th major port of India. So Vadhavan will now be developed as the 13th major port of India, has received that clearance by the board recently, by the cabinet recently. Then it also says that the new Major Port Authorities Act 2021 has been notified for regulation, operation and planning of major ports in India, to Board of Major Port Authority. So that is another very big change that has been brought about to improve governance of port, to improve governance on port. And this has been a legislative change, but a legislative change which can bring a lot of impact nevertheless. So this has been a legislative change where they say that Major Port Authorities Act 2021 on port the Major Port Authorities Act 2021, and this has been introduced from 18th February 2021, notified on 18th February 2021, and the idea is that governance on ports can be improved. So in this case, it is the act provides for regulations, operation and planning of major ports in India, so regulation, operation and planning of major ports in India to now वेस्ट इन, ये सारी जिम्मेवारी जो है रेगुलेशन, ऑपरेशन एंड प्लानिंग ऑफ मेजर पोर्ट्स इन इंडिया, ये सारी जिम्मेवारी जो है वो अब दे दी गई है टू द बोर्ड्स ऑफ मेजर पोर्ट अथॉरिटीज। इन बोर्ड्स ऑफ, तो इस सरकार से निकाल कर एक कॉरपोरेट कल्चर बनाने की कोशिश है, बोर्ड ऑफ मेजर पोर्ट अथॉरिटीज। सो इन दैट केस डिले इन डिसीजन मेकिंग will not happen, and profit-oriented approach will be kept. Efficiency of port infrastructure development will be kept in mind. So this is one good change that has been brought about. It's actually a very good change that has been brought about. And then there is another policy that has been brought up for port-dependent industries to make sure that public-private partnerships can continue on a dynamic basis on the port-dependent industries. So this is a new captive policy has been introduced for port-dependent industries. New captive policy has been introduced for port-dependent industries. So, in this case, those industries which are dependent on the port, which are in a public-private partnership, which are into an agreement with the port authority, to give them some more freedom, some more activity possibility, for renewal of the concession period, expansion and dynamic business environment. So to promote renewal of business period, रिन्यूअल ऑफ कंसेशन अग्रीमेंट, कि जो पब्लिक प्राइवेट पार्टनरशिप अग्रीमेंट है उसके रिन्यूअल जल्दी हो, डायनामिक बिजनेस environment. Dynamic business environment means if a new change takes place, then the adaptability should be quicker with the captive policy, that the port authority should take a faster decision as the port authority has to contemplate, and promoting expansion, that existing industries can expand faster. So promoting expansion. So this is on new captive policy that has been introduced for the port system. So, these are the changes on port. There is one very good discussion they give. They say that the turnaround time for ships on Indian ports, which used to be more than 4 days in 2014, has now been reduced to a little more than 2 days by 2021-22. That is the turnaround time for Indian ports. Please keep that in mind. Turnaround time का मतलब होता है, एक शिप जब भारत के पोर्ट में या किसी भी पोर्ट में अंदर आती है तो सारी क्लियरेंसेस लेने के बाद कितना बढ़िया इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है कि वो लौटकर बाहर निकल सके वहां से. दैट इज द टर्न अराउंड टाइम. जितना ये कम होगा उतनी एफिशिएंसी ज्यादा है. If a ship enters the port, then how quickly can it then leave the port after getting all the clearances? And the more is the turnaround time, higher is the level of efficiency. So when we look at turnaround time of Indian ports has come down, and that's a huge achievement on Indian ports, has come down from 114 hours, almost 5 days, to 60 hours. That's a huge reduction in turnaround time. And Nhava Sheva port on Mumbai has the lowest turnaround time in India. Nhava Sheva, Mumbai has the lowest turnaround time in India. ये इस मामले में भारत का सबसे efficient port है. Lowest turnaround time. It is only 1.7 days. The turnaround time is only 1.7 days. Hardly in 40 hours the ship can come out. And the Chidambaram port has highest turnaround time. Chidambaram port has highest turnaround time. सबसे ज़्यादा turnaround time जो है वो चिदम्बरम पोर्ट का है, सबसे कम नवा शेवा पोर्ट का है, और सबसे improved पोर्ट जो है वो एन्नौर है पिछले 7 सालों में. The Ennore port is the most improved port in the last 7 years. It has reduced its turnaround time from 5 days to now around 2 days. So Ennore port is the most improved port in the last 2 years, last 5 years, as suggested by Economic Survey. So again, that is something that gives us some good information with respect to traffic handling and all. And then of course, there is a coordinated and accelerated growth of India's river system and port system through Maritime India Vision 2030. That please you should keep in mind, that Maritime India Vision 2030 developed for a coordinated view on river movements, that is waterways movement and port development project in India, that has been introduced, that making India the focal point or the major point on global maritime sector. So we have the Maritime India Vision 2030. So March 2021 this was released with the focal area that how India can be made a global point with respect to maritime development. So don't forget this from your prelims point of view also. This remains in picture. Maritime India Vision March 2021 to promote India with a global footprint on maritime or water economy. So this is something you can keep in mind from prelims point of view. You never know if by chance they ask you this. Good afternoon all of you who join me now. So these are the things you can keep in mind. I think beyond this, from port etc., there is not much that you have to remember. Also remember, the Economic Survey informs that on National Waterway 1, with respect to Sahibganj and Banaras, multimodal transit routes are now ready. Banaras and Sahibganj are now fully prepared with multimodal transit routes, that is railway, airway, waterway, roadway connectivity. In Haldia, it is in the process of getting completed, and that is National Waterway 1, Banaras, Sahibganj, Haldia, where it is getting developed. That is one. Second, they say that National Waterway 2, Sadia and Dhubri, will also be operational from this year. So project is moving on that. And National Waterway 16 and Indo-Bangladesh project, all of them protocol are in picture of getting completed this year. So National Waterway 1 already functional. National Waterway 2 functional for commercial, will be functional for bulk transportation this year. National Waterway 16 and India-Bangladesh protocol route, all are expected to be functional by this year. So this is another important information from Economic Survey that you can keep in mind. National Waterway 1, National Waterway 2, India-Bangladesh protocol, and National Waterway 16. All these 3-4 waterway connectivity developed in the last 2-3 years and expected to be completed, Waterway 2, 16 and India-Bangladesh protocol, by the end of this year. So this is another thing that survey talks about. So please keep that in the mind. Sahibganj in Jharkhand, Akanshit. Now, the next thing is, then they give a box on Gati Shakti, but I've already talked to you on Gati Shakti, so I'm not going back to it. Then on telecom, the important thing that they talk about, in telecom, the important thing that they talk about is with respect to the factor that optic fiber cable network is now connecting 1.73 lakh gram panchayats. The optic fiber cable network is now connecting 1.73 lakh gram panchayat, and 5.46 lakh kilometer of optic fiber cable network has been launched. So, but then again, from prelims point of view, I expect that they will ask you policy points more. But remember, 1.73 lakh gram panchayats now connected under BharatNet program through optic fiber cable, optic fiber cable. So this is one big achievement towards which we are moving now. It is expected that BharatNet will be able to cover entire India in another 2 to 2.5 years, as Economic Survey proclaims. And they say that it is moving under public-private partnership model. And the idea is to not only now connect Gram Panchayats, but also to include all inhabited villages in India. सिर्फ Gram Panchayat नहीं, जितने inhabited villages हैं India के, उन्हें भी इस process में include किया जा सके, ये भी objective है. And then the survey also says that Government of India has come up with comprehensive telecom development program for northeastern region and comprehensive telecom development program for islands of India to give them better connectivity and make sure that undersea 2300 kilometers of optic fiber cable has been laid. So comprehensive telecom development program for northeast India and comprehensive telecom development program for islands of India by expansion of optic fiber cable and telecom towers to improve connectivity in remote regions. So this is what has been planned. Improve connectivity in remote regions. So in telecom, that's another thing that you can keep in mind. In telecom, that's another thing that you can keep in mind. And then apart from telecom infrastructure development, that of course is there, the government has given certain reforms in the telecom sector, and that is again a box that survey talks about. So we will quickly cover that, because again in prelims I have seen that the box in the survey are given a lot of importance. So they say that there are structural reforms in telecom that have been initiated. Structural reforms in telecom जिसे initiate किया गया है. So structural reforms like rationalization of adjusted gross revenue. One is that rationalization of adjusted gross revenue. अब एडजस्टेड ग्रॉस रेवेन्यू क्या है? सारे सोर्सेस से जो पैसा कमाती हैं टेलीकॉम कंपनीज, उसका कुछ पार्ट उन्हें सरकार के साथ शेयर करना पड़ता है. The total money that is earned by the telecom companies, they have to share a part of it with the government. That is adjusted gross revenue. So now the government has made a rule that all income earned by the telecoms from sources outside telephony will not be included in it. अगर वो एडवर्टीजमेंट से कोई पैसा कमा रहे हैं, सर्विस प्रोवाइजन से कोई पैसा कमा रहे हैं, उसे अब इसमें इंक्लूड नहीं किया जाएगा. तो कुछ एक्स्ट्रा पैसा टेलीकॉम ऑपरेटर्स के पास रह जाएगा. Telecom operators will be left with some extra money because the money that they are earning from sources other than telephony will not be included as a part of the aggregate gross revenue. So non-telecom revenue will not be a part of the adjusted gross revenue, because out of adjusted gross revenue, otherwise they had to share money with the government. So this is again one aspect. Then second is that bank guarantees against license fee can now be reduced and replaced by securities issued by insurance companies. So bank guarantee not mandatory if replaced by सिक्योरिटी बॉन्ड्स. बैंक गारंटी होता है कि आप एक कंपनी बैंक में कुछ पैसा जमा करे और फिर बैंक उसके प्रोपोर्शन में गारंटी देगी कि अच्छा ये डिफॉल्ट नहीं करेंगे. इससे कंपनीज के 10,000 करोड़, 8,000 करोड़, 2,000 करोड़, बहुत सारे पैसे बैंक के अंदर फंस जाते थे. नाउ विथ सिक्योरिटी इशूड बाय इंश्योरेंस बॉन्ड्स, it will mean that companies will still be able to guarantee that they are ensuring the completion of the project, but their money will not be stuck up in बैंक गारंटी. तो कंपनी के पैसे बैंक गारंटी में नहीं फंसेंगे, लेकिन सिक्योरिटी बॉन्ड्स जो कि इंश्योरेंस कंपनी के थ्रू इशू किए जाएंगे, उससे सरकार भी कन्विंस्ड रहेगी कि डिफॉल्ट नहीं होगा. सो इट्स अगेन अ विन विन सिचुएशन, अ गुड आइडिया दैट हैज बीन ब्रॉट अबाउट. Then another thing that has been brought is that all penalties have been removed for delayed payments and interest rate have been reduced. So interest rate reduced and penalty removed on delayed payment. This is again to help the telecoms revive themselves. Interest rate reduced and penalty removed for delayed payments. So this will help the telecoms in reviving themselves. अब ये क्वेश्चन मैं मेंस में भी एक्सपेक्ट करता हूं कि कोई ठीक नहीं, चूंकि ये सारी बातें पिछले एक साल में हुई हैं, they can always ask you a question in the mains exam that what has been the change that has been brought to revive the telecom sector. Now if it is a pinpointed question on telecom, these are the points that can come very handy. Another improvement brought in by the government is that spectrums will now be auctioned for 30 years rather than 20. So spectrum auction will be for 30 years. अब जो स्पेक्ट्रम मिलेगा टेलीकॉम कंपनीज को, वो 30 साल के लिए मिलेगा, 20 के लिए नहीं. So that's again a good idea that government has introduced. This also answers why the money coming from spectrum auction in the budget is kept in revenue account. क्योंकि हम स्पेक्ट्रम बेचते नहीं हैं, लीज आउट करते हैं, तो किराए की तरह है, तो बजट के रेवेन्यू रिसिप्ट्स में आता है, कैपिटल रिसिप्ट्स में नहीं आता. This is like a rent received by the government because spectrums are not sold, spectrums are leased out, and now the leasing out period will be for 30 years, not for 20 years. Also, what they have done is that spectrum sharing has been encouraged. The two companies can share their spectrum. Earlier, there used to be a spectrum user charge of 0.5%. That has been removed. So, spectrum user charge of 0.5% has been removed. Spectrum user charge of 0.5% has been removed to promote spectrum sharing. तो इससे आसानी से ज्यादा दिनों तक और ज्यादा लोगों को मोबाइल सेवा पहुंचाई जा सकती है. सो कंपनीज कैन शेयर देयर स्पेक्ट्रम without paying spectrum user charge, which is again a very good decision that has been taken. And then 100% FDI under automatic route has been allowed in telecom. 100% FDI in automatic route has been allowed. Now earlier it was only up to 74%, but now the government says that they can allow 100% FDI in telecom. Under automatic route. So all these are the structural reforms that have been brought in. Please keep that in mind. This will help. Then of course they have given the procedural reforms, and they have also given the liquidity requirement that the government has approved for all the telecom service providers. Again, within that, if you ask me, the liquidity requirement for telecom service providers is what you can add to these points if you are writing an answer on what are the steps taken by the government to promote telecom sector in India. That liquidity provision for telecom service providers has been improved, like giving 4 years of moratorium in annual payment of dues due to the annual the aggregate gross revenue judgment that the Supreme Court gave a couple of years back, So the adjusted gross revenue, that just to make sure that your answer sheet can have that, तो आप ये पॉइंट जरूर रखना अगर आप टेलीकॉम रिफॉर्म पे लिख रहे हो. बट ये अब स्ट्रक्चरल रिफॉर्म नहीं है, ये अब लिक्विडिटी सर्विस प्रोविजन रिफॉर्म्स हैं. लिक्विडिटी सर्विस प्रोविजन रिफॉर्म्स. लेकिन ये तुम अपने टेलीकॉम के आंसर में जरूर लिख सकते हो. You can always write an answer, it in the answer on what are the steps taken by the government to promote telecom. वहाँ जरूर ये बहुत अच्छा fit in कर सकता है. So the government has given a moratorium, एक रोक लगा दी है और टाइम दे दिया है टेलीकॉम कंपनीज को 4 साल तक का to clear the dues arising on AGR. सुप्रीम कोर्ट के रूलिंग से जो एडजस्टेड ग्रॉस रेवेन्यू का ड्यू अराइज हुआ उसको पे करने के लिए 4 साल तक का टाइम दे दिया गया है. एंड सिमिलरली मोराटोरियम ऑफ 4 years to clear dues on spectrum auction. जो स्पेक्ट्रम ऑक्शनिंग पार्ट है, अगेन टू क्लियर द ड्यूज 4 years ऑफ टाइम हैज बीन गिवन बाय द गवर्नमेंट. द गवर्नमेंट हैज ऑल्सो गिवन द ऑप्शन टू द सर्विस प्रोवाइडर्स, that if they want to convert their debt with the government arising due to dues into equity. यही वोडाफोन आइडिया ने किया. That Vodafone Idea chose that we will convert our debt into equity and give the government 35% share in Vodafone Idea. We will convert our debt into equity and give the government a 35% share in Vodafone Idea. तो ये 9th बात जो मैंने लिखी है, this was what Vodafone Idea chose, that they said we can't pay our dues immediately, but yes, we can allow the government or offer the government to convert it into equity. So that is something that they have given. That's again interesting. On petroleum, crude and natural gas, they have given us the results, but that is again where nothing new is there. So in that case, I suggest that you can skip those portions. We don't need to go into too many details on that. In electricity, again, there is no new project that they talk about. In electricity, again in petroleum, natural gas, there is nothing new they mention, and there is nothing important from prelims or mains point of view. But in electricity, the one thing that from prelims point of view you should keep in mind is the share of different sectors. Now if we have been together in the GS class, you have already got it from me, but just a quick recap for you. 54% share for coal, 8% share other than that for other fossil fuel. So 62% of total electricity generation capacity in India, which is around 390 lakh megawatt, 390,000 megawatt, is through non-renewable source. And apart from this 62%, around 25% is through, 24.5% is through renewable energy source, excluding the large hydroelectric projects. And 12% is through large hydroelectric projects and 1% by nuclear energy. So out of total 390,000 megawatt of electricity generation capacity in India, 62% is by non-renewable energy, out of which 54% is almost by coal, suggesting how important coal is still in India's energy mix. Then 24-25% by renewable energy, in which solar energy plays the maximum role now. The largest source of renewable energy in generation process now in India is solar energy. Please keep that in mind. Followed by wind energy. So solar energy has the highest source now, and then followed by large hydroelectric projects, which contribute 12% of energy generation capacity, and nuclear energy is at 1%. So I think if we look at economic survey, that is the only one thing that they give us as important. Yes, there is one more thing that we need to keep in mind. So I'm giving you that figure, that in terms of electricity, if we can take generation capacity कि प्रोड्यूस करने की कैपेसिटी कितनी इंस्टॉल्ड है, एंड इफ वी कैन टेक एक्चुअल जनरेशन, तो ये है इंस्टॉल्ड जनरेशन कैपेसिटी, इंस्टॉल्ड कैपेसिटी कितनी है, और एक है एक्चुअल जनरेशन। तो इंस्टॉल्ड कैपेसिटी के हिसाब से द थर्मल सोर्स is 66% to 66%, 7%. Renewable is around 22%, and hydro is 10%. Nuclear is 1%. बट अगर एक्चुअल जनरेशन देखें तो थर्मल का बहुत जबरदस्त contribution है 78%, renewable is 10%, 9% is large hydro, and 3% is nuclear. So in terms of actual energy produced, well, we see there's a huge difference where the fossil fuels dominate big time when it comes to the actual production capacity in electricity. So government is trying for moving towards cleaner energy. There is more try to get into solar wind hybrid program. There is also about solar photovoltaic program. Government is also creating production linked incentive schemes in these sectors, purchasing power agreements among people for renewable energy. But still we see that the dominance is of the thermal energy in overall scheme of things. So kindly keep that as one important aspect in this whole discussion that you must keep in mind. तो एक ये इकोनॉमिक सर्वे से हमें मिलता है, उसमें एक और इम्पॉर्टेंट बात मिलती है अबाउट लॉस ऑफ एनर्जी ड्यू टू transmission and distribution losses और aggregate tariff and commercial losses. इलेक्ट्रिसिटी के थेफ्ट की वजह से हमारा कितना एनर्जी लॉस होता है. सो एट ऑल इंडिया लेवल इट्स अराउंड 20%. The aggregate tariff and commercial loss, all India level it is around 20%, and the maximum is happening in Northeast where it is almost 30%. So Northeast has the largest number, and lowest is in southern region around 17%. Others are almost matching each other, but Northeast is largely ahead. So that is where we will have to take care that the commercial losses of distribution companies can be restricted. Reserve price is much because 5G is a more improved technology, Abhishek. That is why reserve prices are much. And it is for 30 years, not for 20 years. And since it is for 30 years, so reserve prices will be, more in this system. All right. Krishna, for optional course, you can contact Next IAS. We are beginning from 15th June. The FDI was restricted previously, Bhavani, because we were worried about whether we will be able to serve all or not. And also, we were worried that foreigners might interfere in our day-to-day activities. Manisha, spectrum are airwaves used for communication. That is called spectrum. The rate of ACT loss all over India, Devansh, is approximately 18% to 20%. Okay, this is on infrastructure that you needed to know. Now I am taking you into a discussion on services, which is a very small discussion because there is hardly anything in the chapter which they can ask you in the exam. The service sector chapter, though they have given a lot of information in it, but the point is that there is not much that they can ask us in the exam. So when we look at the one thing that is there is share of service sector in gross value added has come down from 55% to 53% between 2019-20 and 2021-22. So this is one thing we see about services. that it has come down to that extent, and the major loss has been observed in trade, hotels, transport, communication, and services related to broadcasting. So remember, major loss in trade, hotel, transportation, communication, and broadcasting. This is this sector, and remember, even though broadcasting and communication have done well in it, but trade, hotel, transportation, all services based on connectivity, and due to COVID pandemic, we have suffered a lot on that account. Naveen, unfortunately, this is not the place where I can discuss this with you in detail, but it's not always a very good idea, if you ask me, about whether we are doing good or bad there. Not always a very good idea, if you ask me, to take equity. Okay, then remember the other thing that is important in services or trends in high frequency indicators हैं, कोई फायदा नहीं, वो high frequency indicators trend and all पढ़ो भी मत, एक रुपया खर्च मत करो अपना उसको पढ़ने में, you will unnecessarily spend your time. The talks on passenger traffic, bank credit to service sector, do not put into that. Then another thing from prelims point of view which will be important is that in 12 out of 33 states and union territories, service is the dominant sector with more than 50% of the share. So 12, ये सब चीजें prelims में वो पूछ लेते हैं. 12 out of 33 states and union territories for which the data is available, service sector has more than 50% share. Has more than 50% share. The highest is in Chandigarh, more than 50% share. और इसमें highest is in Chandigarh and lowest is in Sikkim. The highest share of service sector is in Chandigarh and the lowest share of service sector is in Sikkim. Highest share of service sector is in Chandigarh and lowest share of service sector is in Sikkim. So these two things again you can keep in mind. In Sikkim it is actually around 24% of the total share and in Chandigarh it is 74%. तो सिक्किम में ये 24 से 25% है of total gross value added in Sikkim और चंडीगढ़ में 74% of total gross value added is services sector. So these are factuals you can keep in mind from prelims point of view, but again I don't suspect that they will push you into this much of it. Again, FDI inflows into services sector, they give us a gross value. Again, nothing much there. IT sector has the highest recipient, is the highest recipient of FDI in services sector. Now I know that even without me telling you that, you would know. So IT sector has the highest share, followed by financial business outsourcing and research and development sector, and then followed by the trading sector, education sector, and then the trading sector. So again, trends on FDI, with respect to total share, बस यही एक अगेन प्रीलिम्स पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से इंपॉर्टेंट है, मेंस से तो बिल्कुल नहीं. तो इसके अंदर हाईएस्ट शेयर जो है वो इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी सेक्टर का है, कंप्यूटर सॉफ्टवेयर एंड हार्डवेयर. द हाईएस्ट शेयर इज दैट कंप्यूटर सॉफ्टवेयर and hardware. And out of total FDI that comes in India in services sector, 43%, 42.5% goes into this sector. The second highest, of course, then is in the sector connected to finance, because banking, etc., gets a lot of, a lot of return. Yes, services still struggling, no doubt about it. So finance, business outsourcing, R&D, that finance, business, outsourcing, R&D, courier, all these services, they get another 18% and they are at second highest. They get another 18, in fact, they get 19% and they are at second highest. It's 18.84, so around 19%, the second highest. and education is the third highest with around 13% of total share in FDI. Education, especially in university education, since research and development by foreign firms are allowed, so in education we see 13% FDI coming in, and then trading has around 12% FDI. तो अगर कभी सर्विस सेक्टर पे ये सवाल आए कि कौन से जगह है सर्विस सेक्टर में जहां मैक्सिमम एफडीआई आता है, then you can see that almost 86-87% of total FDI is limited to these 4 sectors in services system. So that's another thing that you can keep in mind. But again, as I said, this chapter is very low on importance. Now, trade in services has been growing, and services exports have shown some higher growth here. India's share in global service exports has been continuously rising, and it is more than 4%. India's share in global service exports has risen from less than 0.5% in 1991 to 4.2% by 2021. So our service exports are rising very quickly. Needless to say, again, the largest comes from the IT sector. The software services have the largest contribution in service exports in India, followed by business services. The largest comes from our IT sector, that is 42% again, and then the second highest comes from the trading sector. So remember, service sector growth has been tremendous. Even in the year 21-22, we have achieved a record $250 billion of service exports. That has taken India's total exports this year to $670 billion approximately. Big time record. In commodity exports, we are now touching $418 billion, highest ever by India, and $250 billion services exports. So we are touching almost $670 billion of exports, goods and services combined. So service sector has done well there, but again trade has the dominant share, 42%, business services after that 19%, and travel after that 12%. So in service sector, if they ask you that which is the dominant, so software exports from India are dominant at 42%, and then trade at 19%, and then tourism related services at 12%, and then travel at 11%. तो अगर बाई चांस आपसे पूछते हैं कभी कि क्या डोमिनेंट है इंडिया में, तो वो ये चीजें हैं. दिस इज, आई एम सो सॉरी, दिस इज ट्रैवल एंड टूरिज्म, एंड दिस इज ट्रांसपोर्ट, शिपिंग एंड ऑल. तो ये फिगर्स थोड़े अगर याद रख लो तो प्रीलिम्स के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से काफी अच्छा है. इफ यू कैन रिमेंबर दिस फिगर, देन फ्रॉम प्रीलिम्स पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू you are better off. But other than that, again, there is nothing important. एक टॉपिक है सब सेक्टर वाइज परफॉर्मेंस, बिल्कुल भी इंपॉर्टेंट नहीं है, पूरे का पूरा आप स्किप कर सकते हो. जो टेलीकॉम रेगुलेशन रिमूवल पे एक बॉक्स है, वो भी आप एक्सक्लूड कर सकते हो, बिकॉज इट इज ऑन creating other service providers, like those who are in business process outsourcing, those who are in knowledge process outsourcing. They have been given relief. They are not counted as telecom operators anymore. They are counted as service sector firms hereafter. So there is a clearer definition for those who are doing call center services and all, those who are doing knowledge process outsourcing and all, accounting services, legal services, clearer definition given by the government to promote such exports all across in India. So and the same thing, removal of registration requirement for them, removal of bank guarantee requirement for them, to attract more and more foreign investments in other service provision in the business process outsourcing sector. Work done from home is allowed, work done from remote locations is allowed as a part of work done from the company. So legally reforms have been done that business process outsourcing industry will now be recognized as a separate industry. Along with that, no no bank guarantee charges on them. They will not have to furnish bank guarantees anymore. Also, it is said that there will be no registration requirement on them compulsorily. Also, it is said that work from home is allowed legally for business process outsourcing firms. So all these are the changes that have been brought about in the process. So, but then again, from prelims point of view or mains point of view, I suspect they will ask you something huge from here. Then on ports, I have already given you the information of which is the most efficient port and which is the least efficient port. Then, you know, there is one thing that is important, I believe, from this year's point of view, that is drone rules 2021. This is a box given in economic survey, which I believe is important, because drone is something, the unmanned aircraft system, that even the budget was talking about per se. So the promotional avenues, promotional or supporting policies for drones, if you ask me, one, number of permissions reduced from 25 to 5. You know, number of permissions reduced from 25 to 5. So various approvals have been abolished. So simplification of procedure, simplification of procedure, by abolishing approvals. This is one thing that has been done for drone. Second is the type of fee which was taken earlier has now been reduced from 72 to 4. Type of fee and reduced from 72 to 4. Reduced from 72 to 4, and amount of fee reduced significantly. So making it easier and cheaper for people to get permission. The type of fee reduced, amount of fee reduced. One thing that economic survey doesn't tell you, it doesn't tell you, is introduction of production linked incentive scheme of rupees 120 crore for drones. That's again something interesting, that production linked incentive scheme, 14th sector, is the drone sector that has been introduced. That has been introduced. Then remember, another is that prior security clearance has been removed, and drone area operation has now been expanded. So removing prior security clearance up to a size of drone, of course. The larger drones will still need it. And another is that area of operation has been expanded. So the idea is to promote as much as possible the development of drone industry. If you ask me from this chapter, I consider this part as one of the most important part overall. Also, simplified process for certification, and foreign investments are now more easily allowed. So foreign owned and controlled Indian companies can also conduct drone operations in India. So relaxation on foreign owned companies. Relaxations on foreign owned companies. So that will encourage more FDI into India. इससे ये पता चलेगा कि आप ज़्यादा FDI ला सकते हो ड्रोन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में, तो टेक्नोलॉजी भी अच्छी आ सकती है. So better technology, better FDI, that's again something that we are targeting. And then there is reduced penalty from 5 lakh to 1 lakh. and they have removed the remote pilot license requirement. Removal of remote pilot license requirement. Removal of remote pilot license requirement. अब कोई भी रिमोट पायलट लाइसेंस रिक्वायरमेंट की जरूरत नहीं. मतलब क्या है कि सिंप्लीफाई किया जा रहा है चीजों को, सो दैट पार्टिसिपेशन कैन बी रेज्ड. द आइडिया इज टू सिंप्लीफाई द प्रोसेस सो दैट पार्टिसिपेशन कैन बी रेज्ड. एंड देन ऑफ कोर्स there is relaxation for research and development. Certification has been made easy and penalties have been reduced. So relaxed rules for research and development, permissions have been reduced and penalties reduced from rupees 5 lakhs to rupees 1 lakh. The penalty has been reduced to that extent. So this is one factor, if you ask me, इस पूरे services sector से, इस पूरे services sector से, this is the one factor which I believe is most important. After that, the talk on startups, the talk on revised guidelines for producing geospatial data, patents, ये technical talks हैं, आप बड़े आराम से इनको avoid कर सकते हो. So on services topic, this much is important. On services topic, this much is important. See, I was saying that in the class the other day, economics is so wonderful. Best camps, funds, hot girls and boys, they all interfere in our talk. आप सोचो इकोनॉमिक्स सीखने कितने तरह के लोग आते हैं. आपको याद होगा एक दिन मैं ऑप्शनल क्लास में आपको कह रहा था, तो लोग हमारे इस क्लास को भी स्पैम कर सकते हैं. मुझे ठीक लगता है ये देखकर कि अच्छा कितने लोग इतने, और आपके बारे में क्या सोचते हैं जो आप देखने वाले लोग हो, कि आप इस पर क्लिक करोगे जाकर और इनको देखने जाओगे. बट एनीवेज, आई जस्ट सॉ इट ऑन द चैट बॉक्स. And thankfully the team has deleted them, but I feel sorry for them. बेचारे कितना अच्छा प्रमोट कर रहे थे खुद को, हमारी टीम ने उनको डिलीट कर दिया. तो और आप में से कुछ लोग शायद अगर जाना चाहते तो जा सकते थे. मुझे उम्मीद है अभी तो प्रीलिम्स लेके बिजी हो गए. But anyways, jokes apart, this is on services and this is on the talks on chapter 8 infrastructure. Thank you as always for being there. I will see you tomorrow around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we will finish economic survey discussions today, tomorrow after that. Thanks a lot. Great to see you all. Bye-bye. I'll see you tomorrow 4 o'clock in the afternoon to finish all the economic survey discussions. Thank you. Have a great evening. Bye-bye. Economics is an addiction. Correct, Shwetank? Bye-bye then. Thank you. Bye.